coming a little bit late. Lee's on from Amsterdam. Hi, Lee. And Chris from Florida. Annie P's with us. MK's in the house down C. Hello there. I've got Unmarked with us. I've got somebody with me this evening.
Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour. Hey, Kristen. Hey, Catherine. Linda.
Hello.
Linda's in Edmonton. She's a good Albert. Diane. Franny. Hey. Hugs to you, Annie. Hugs to you. So we've been having real shop talk, John and I, about the setup. John has this excellent speaker. How's the sound, everyone? Thumbs up.
Give us a thumbs up, please. Yeah, I'm getting lost. Yeah, we're good. We're live to go.
Great.
So we're hoping that because of this time of night, we're going to take you on an interesting route. Hopefully some interesting chat. Hi, Lorraine. But we're hoping that we're going to get some nice postcards as well. So we've got some great buildings and hopefully some decent light as well. So you'll be here to see the light coming down over London town. So nice to talk. And Natalie's with us. Hi, from the Netherlands.
It's my friend Joe, who lives in Market Harbour.
Hi, Joe. Yeah. So we like light. Yes, we do.
Suzanne.
We've got a lot of friends here.
It's not,
so.
this,
Hi,
is,
Robert.
this is so much not a new hat, Suzanne. I bought this in Cork in 1991 before I was born. But it was St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, and I'm just much taller than him. He sat down. You don't know. He's a wee dwarf.
I never told you.
He never sounds sexy with him big. He's a long way away. That's how it kind of works.
So I met John earlier today. I was doing a private tour, but just before John was coming on, it was train time. And so we recognized each other immediately across. And I went over and I'm like, John, you are so tall. And actually, no, you see, we're not.
No.
But...
and we're live. Good afternoon, good evening. Welcome wherever you are joining us here on Hago. My name is John, and I'm with uber popular guide here, Patrick, normally seen in Banff or other parts of the world. But today we're both in London, and we're going to spend the next hour taking you through a route I don't think the London guides have done. Hopefully see some of the iconic sites. We're not from London, so don't expect us to have the same knowledge that the London guides have got, and maybe they'll be inspired to come and do the route themselves afterwards. Who knows? I think it's a good one. So without further ado, let's stand up. So
there we are. See?
Ship shape and ready.
Ship shape and ready to go, ladies and gentlemen. It's lovely to meet you.
And anybody's got the map up, they can possibly see. But we are in front of what I would say is one of the great iconic sites of London. Anybody want to throw a guess in where we're at? No, he's not a leprechaun. He's a leprechaun. No,
he's not a leprechaun. Now.
No, it's not St. Paul's.
Maria, hola.
But we're going down that way. The Old Bailey. So Natalie's got it right. The Old Bailey. So Natalie has got it right. We are at the Central Criminal Court.
Oh, Natalie.
So
Natalie, you're meant to be having a beer with us after.
Yeah, Natalie. Yeah, she pretended she was busy, and here she is on the tour, right?
Yeah.
So look at it at the top. We've got the lady, the scales of justice, and do you know, Patrick, one of the great kind of apocryphal stories is that this lady is wearing a blindfold.
I don't think she is.
You're right. No. Do you know
why? Because she was pure.
She was pure, indeed. So she's actually pure. She's a maiden. So the idea is she can't be corrupted. So if she's in charge of justice, she's yet too young to have been influenced, if you like, by the ways of man. So consequently, in her hands, justice is safe. Yeah. Now, whether you'd be safe here at the Central Criminal Court, that's another matter. It depends, obviously, what you've done. But actually, this building looks like one of your, the most kind of ancient buildings in the city. But actually, it's kind of modern. It's sort of Baroque, if you like. It was built in about 1902. But there's been a court here on this site since the 16th century. And he stood next to us, going to walk past here, the old Newgate Prison. And Newgate Prison was a place of kind of public execution. Before we get to that, we were just looking at this, Patrick, were we not? There's an inscription above... How well you can see from here, but just above the black. Do you want to read it out, Patrick? What it says?
It does. Defend the children of the poor and punish the wrongdoer. What a meaningful statement. John and I share a lot of political outlook together. I think we've become, really quite meaningful friends over the last year, getting to know each other, and we come from this perspective. But I'm not convinced about the whole punishment culture, but defend the children of the poor. I think there's something for us to reflect upon just fundamentally there in a world with such disequality that we have engendered and had it historically. But I think there is a T-shirt, Casey. I think that's something quite meaningful to
and it seems as well, doesn't it? As we kind of walk on here, that in some respects, we've kind of inverted it, haven't we? We're about to walk into the financial district, and if we think of the mayhem, and the aftershocks that are still being created by the financial crisis, I'm not sure they were punished, were they? I think it's the children of the poor that are being punished, really. So I think we've kind of got that wrong.
I think the evidence globally, and it would be very hard for anyone to disagree, institutions need to work, and that's important. But oh goodness me, who pays the price every single time in this day and age? And it's funny, as we're talking about climate change, I was over at Canada House today, and there's a sign about the Inuit and climate change. And of course, what we can learn from Indigenous Canada is look back 7 generations and look forward 7 generations.
Yeah.
And they never thought of justice as punishment. They thought of recuperation or rebuilding society. So yeah, it was a great place to start, John, as a conversation.
So as we're walking past now the kind of the new annex, if you like, the secure in the office blocks of the Central Court, this is the site of the old Newgate jail. And Newgate was kind of notorious, the ultimate kind of nightmare jail for incarceration. I mean, for a start, you had to pay to be in there. Can you believe that?
Well, they used to do that in La Paz in Bolivia as well, but that was narco money. So
yeah. And down here, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, was a place of public execution. Scaffolds, would be built, and execution would happen in the street. It's hard to believe now. I mean, tell me about Canada. Did you guys have execution? Public execution?
Do you know, there must have been public execution. I know in Quebec City, by as early as the 1640s, you had to wear a license to be a beggar.
Yeah.
So, that was your class system built in. But my grandfather, for all the Canadians on board, was a journalist, and he actually witnessed the last hanging in Canada, but I don't think it was public. The idea of us gathering on a Sunday.
Yeah.
In fact, we're meeting friends at the end of this at the Hung, Drawn, and Quartered Pub. We talk about this, but let's just let that soak in for a minute.
Yeah.
What that really, a Sunday afternoon activity was to see someone ripped in quarters by horses running in different directions. By the way, Donna says hi, everyone. I see that. Hugs to you, Donna.
So can I just come in there? So, my apologies. I can't very easily. I will in a moment. As soon as I get a chance, I'll put the map on. But let me just tell you where you are. So we're walking down the street called Old Bailey. We're about to turn left into Ludgate Hill. And in front of us, the next kind of monument we're going to see is St. Paul's. So I'm afraid I have to turn off the day. Home-based tour. So I do apologise.
Is it up?
It's not. So the mapping software isn't up at the moment, but if you can just bear with me for sort of 2 minutes, I will. Is everybody experiencing that? The sound's not too good. Well, we'll just talk a little bit louder, but it may. I've just dropped on 2 out around court buildings and so forth. You do get the attempts to kind of control it.
That is really remarkable, but it does. I remember the last time I was in London when I was out with John doing an evening tour, we suddenly lost connection a couple of times in a city with, because the best connection in the world. But here we are coming around to St. Paul's Cathedral, and we are literally in the city of London here, the 1 square mile, which is pretty fun. Oh, Ophelia, hola. Ophelia is our friend who lives in El Tule in Oaxaca, in Mexico.
Oh, okay. Fantastic. Yeah.
Yep. And joined us. So Ophelia, un abrazo desde acá, Londres.
So just hovering into view now, I think it's probably one of those incredible sites, in London. I think, in terms of all the buildings here. And again, I'm sure many of you will recognise, even though I apologise the mapping's not on, and I'm going to try and attend to that in just in a moment, which is a busy street I want to stop and trip over because I'm fadding around my phone, is St. Paul's Cathedral is coming into view. And St. Paul's really sort of symbolic, is it not, the kind of rebuild, Patrick?
Well, it's Christopher Wren, of course, but I mean, it's the fact that it sort of stands as the model of British survival, however one feels about that historically. Yeah, it is grand. There is a book inside, I believe. I'm digging back into my memory here, but there's a book of every American soldier or air person who lost their life in the war. I believe that's inside here as well.
So Fleet Street is just behind us. We're actually on Ludgate Hill, walking towards now the sort of front end of St. Paul's. So we're going to sort of follow St. Paul's all the kind of way round. But I think it's called St. Paul's Churchyard, or Graveyard, is the name of the street. Picture's blurry, try reloading. I'm getting 4 out of 5 on signal. So consequently,
we're solid,
I think we're okay now. I think it was just as I say, there might have been some kind of damper on the signal. Obviously, it's central London, so it could be numbers of people around. Obviously, there's a kind of bunch of stuff. But when we get to a closer, as you might
I think
say,
it's because there were 2 half Irishmen in front of the British
I think it may well be. I think,
the issue was
see a plane flying over. You see that? So I think part of the problem right now is the number of people on the street, and of course this is, the reality is it not. Let's just stop here for a moment and just take in the opportunity. Yeah, of course, we're in central London. It's straight after walk, so consequently we're always going to be fighting against it. But nonetheless, there's not much you can do as you're in central London, centre of a city. So yeah, as Patrick was saying, following the Great Fire of London, this was the sort of first major iconic building that was rebuilt. And as a result, this cathedral here, obviously Anglican, is probably the most famous, the most important of the kind of post-Reformation buildings in England. It is being built in a deliberately very different style. When you think about the Minster or Westminster Cathedral, it completely eschews the Gothic in every way. It's sort of Palladian in style. It's harking back to a classical civilization. It has more in common with the sort of Duomo, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean? And Florence.
Or Magdalen in Paris. Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Than anything that is sort of medieval. So it's almost like in renewing, the whole thing's burnt down. When you start again, you're starting again with this Baroque style, a very, very different feel. So here is Queen Anne.
There she is.
Right in front. Obviously the monarch.
Didn't she have an inordinate number of children, Queen Anne?
She did, and she lost them all.
Yeah.
So consequently, when she passed over, they had to invite the House of Hanover. So the George Kings came over as a result.
Right.
Because she had an enormous amount of pregnancies. We think she may have had, obviously, problems with her waterworks, as you might say. But yeah, she's going to have great unfortunate sort of ill-judged figures and monarchs of England. But you're just kind of scanning up and looking at the sheer work and artistry.
Derek, we're at St. Paul's Cathedral in the City of London here. So remember, London, the City of London is 1 square mile in amongst what is Greater London, as we know it today. But yes, I think yesterday my friend David showed me we were looking at the statue of King Charles II, and apparently he had 14 children, not a single one with his own wife.
Really? Yeah, we said the Merry Monarch.
Yeah, the Merry Monarch.
Yeah. For all sorts of reasons. Yeah. But kept moving out Catholics as well, unfortunately, which was not ideal really for the lineage of the family.
BF tour group, they're everywhere.
Oh, it's busy.
Yeah.
It's busy. And I mean, I think if anything, kind of today is really showing that if we're not cut back to normal, we're a hell of a long way there, are we not? In terms of...
it's busy. London is busy. Oh, and by the way, there's the walkie-talkie in the distance. Look at that light. Now, this is totally...
What's the gimbal?
Sorry.
I'm just going to redo the gimbal, guys, and then we'll just be back up very short. So I think what's interesting as well is that when this was built in the 1670s, I believe... Get back up. This was the tallest structure in London. And it remained so until about the 1960s. And after this point, we started kind of building our cathedrals in glass and concrete. Mammon was the god we were celebrating. The great buildings in front of us that we're going to start to walk amongst very shortly are monuments to finance, to capital, to trade. Mm-hmm. They're not really about faith. About humanity. God has been replaced, is he not? When we look at this, the temples of the district we're about to walk through are of a wholly different order.
It's a lot to unpack there, John. I'd say when God made man, she was only joking.
Well, okay.
But, there's Mary Lou in Calgary.
Nonetheless, the intent of the builders is to the glory of Mammon and finance rather than...
I wonder.
Look at the central tower here, folks. It really... Look at that. Cheryl says Queen Anne had 17 pregnancies. That really is quite something, isn't it?
It's tragic in its own way, isn't it? Yeah.
So if you can see on the kind of skyline emerging in front of us, unfortunately, if it's the volume, I don't think there's a volume issue because we're both speaking with quite an amount of projection. I don't think it's the microwave. I think, unfortunately, we're just getting hit by variability on 4G just because of the amount of people that are around us. So I'd love to say, do this, hit refresh, but if it's the fact that we're just sharing 4G with people, that it's limited to what we can do. But what we can do, of course, is keep moving. I think that's the best thing that we can do, is keep moving. Because it gives you a sense of London, the area, just sort of walking down towards the Thames, right in the kind of the midst of what I would call the institutions of Britain, right?
Oh, fundamentally, yes. I mean, Fleet Street as well. You may have read about it. That's where all the newspapers used to be. But this was the financial capital of the empire, which represented about one-fifth of humanity. Of course, Whitehall was governance. But this was the power structure of so much of the world. Paris would have been the other one. It's remarkable to actually contemplate that. Linda, could be the wind, but I'm really interested to see John's hookup here. He has this road system. Very different from what I use, but when there's two of us, of course, we really can't put in the headphones. I have a friend who works just up the road here, and we had coffee last time I was in London.
Yeah?
Yeah. But I mean,
to say hello to the Voyagers
Well,
because I'm going home, and they kept saying they wanted to see me. So
then
hi, I'm
do you wanna
going
have
home now.
cocktail?
Bye.
got a stalker on the tour.
I'll see you.
all right, there she is. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody, waving at you. Thanks, Donna. Bye-bye. So onwards and upwards, and we're going to head now down towards the kind of the heart of the sort of financial institutions. You know, in front of us down here, and it's always, I find it kind of remarkable. London's this huge city, in Greater London, but then actually the kind of key institutions are very, very close together, right?
Oh, it's all walkable. Yep.
It's sort of concentration. Of course, you know, all these places were built long before there were kind of cars and people moving around in hansom cabs and so forth. For convenience, I suppose everything was kind of co-located. So within a very short distance, you've got all the levers of power.
Do you know one of the interesting statistics that the Blue Badge guides always tell me when I'm here is that back during sort of the middle of the 19th century, when this is this booming world capital and people traveled by horse-drawn carriage, the average speed in London was about 8.5 miles per hour.
Yeah.
And now it's about
Lim.
8.5 miles per hour.
Yes, we did, Lim. So, but did you know that in the Victorian era, there was 8 postal deliveries a day in London? Yeah, because obviously everyone, like the email of it, there was postcards, right?
Sure, yep.
So consequently, you could send a postcard out, what are you doing this evening or whatever, get your reply back, and there'll be 8 potential opportunities to share a message a day. So we tend to think of it instantaneous communications as a modern thing, but actually within a small geographical area, it's entirely possible with runners going backwards and forwards.
A fundamental part of communication.
Yeah.
And how separate this would have been from the rest of the country, too.
So just while waiting on the red light, I'll just spin us back round so we can kind of get a sense of, again, the light coming down St Paul's. Thank you, Andrea. Again, I think, just to say, one of the great, wonderful sights of London, of course, absolutely, Charles and Diana married here in 81, those who can remember that famous wedding. But also the funerals, Admiral Lord Nelson, Duke of Wellington, Margaret Thatcher, Winston Churchill, all had their services done here. So this really is, if you like, the mother church of the British state. This is the place, even more so than Westminster Abbey, where the coronations are held, because they were held once in, every blue moon. This is the place where, actually, I think we can probably...
And I think it was really good that I didn't offer commentary on a single one of those people.
Really? Patrick's very, very tight lipped. Think of all the kind of the colonial ills, right, and the bad stuff that all can be associated with all those people. But nonetheless, they are part of our nation's story. They, of course, were projected as the heroes. That's who we look at the statues. That's who we see, rightly or wrongly. There's now laws to protect. You got laws to protect your statues in Canada?
I don't know. No, because we've been pulling them down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cook was thrown
and you
into
pulled out Yorkshire lad in the river, didn't you?
Yeah,
you threw him a swim.
We threw him into the ocean in Victoria.
Most unfair voyages.
But we have Terry Fox, so that's
Terry Fox. Yeah. So the signal's dropping again. So we're just going to walk on a little bit, and he let Thatcher.
Yeah.
Right. So we're walking down towards the Mansion House. That's the next of the buildings that we're going to sort of see, because we're just trying to feature these kind of iconic, really, rather nice. But as I say, what you've got now, of course, is this blending and merging of the historic London with these very bold, modern, striking, kind of Richard Rogers-inspired architecture. It's all about glass. And I think there's a parallel, whether it's deliberate or I'm just reaching for something that's not there. It seems to me that you've got cathedrals full of glass, and then the financial houses are full of glass. I know you've got to have windows, of course you have windows, but there seems to be some kind of parallel, some kind of similar grandeur that is being set out. So we look at these buildings, that these kings of the world, the emperors, these that make the decisions that affect our lives, the minutiae of our lives, the prices we pay, sit in these temples of glass and concrete.
It's well, I mean, it's, yeah. Whether you're reaching, I mean, there's obviously you can just about piece everything from Victorian and then 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, the new architecture. I think since the turn of the century, I really love the refresh that London's been going through. But yeah, you sort of got Victorian brick, and then but just the modern glass towers as they look out on the world. And this is one of the places where financial decisions are made around the world.
Yeah.
And continuously, and right now, and particularly right now, because so much of the money that's been laundered through here is now being cut off.
Yeah.
You know, all the oligarch money that.
And the buildings we're walking past, the decisions made within there affect our pensions, don't they? Do you know what I mean, and our well-being and our future well-being.
Literally,
you know?
everything. Yep.
These are the buildings where, whether we're going to do well or less well than we'd like, this is where decisions are made, and we're somewhat powerless. We're at their mercy, are we not? But
the Bank of England raised interest rates today.
Yeah.
The Bank of Canada did last week as well, because of course we're living in a world of inflation at the moment for all sorts of reasons.
So I'll just give you a map, because we didn't have mapping software on. So just to kind of show where we're kind of heading towards, we are going up towards the Mansion House, the Bank of England, the Royal Exchange. This chick now to be on camera, so we'll just indulge him very briefly. There you are, you're a star, sir. And we're heading now, as I say, into the heart of the financial district. So for those that wanted kind of know where you are, here we go, and off we go. Thank you. Lovely. It's a nice bin wagon there, so keeping it real.
He's still. I think he likes you, John.
Did he?
Yeah, I feel like you have a.
That's nice. Glory had, absolutely. You know.
Yeah.
You know,
nice fella.
I think this is just the reality, you know, of... I'll just flip it up so you can Patrick's nice face for a minute. This is the reality of doing stuff in the streets, is that you are constantly at the mercy of people that see you and wish to be a part of it. Now, I'll just flick you back to a bit of history now. We are now by the Guild Church of St Mary. And the guilds are a really important part of London history. And actually, they're called livery companies typically in London, although they have a guild hall. And of course, they ran aspects of trade. There's not very many older churches in London, so I think this is kind of nice to be able to feature.
I wonder if Mark and Lee are still on board here. Of course, we were looking at the guilds in the centre of Brussels in December with them. There you are, Lee. Hey, Lee. And Lee was meant to be over here too with all of us, by the way, everyone. And then she went and had like work or something.
Yeah.
So,
thing by the church, was it the purple one? I don't know what that question means. There's some purple neon, I think, if that's what you're talking about. If you can just see it on the edge of the picture there. Or there's some purple bin bags, neither of which I think we need to probably dwell on, but it may be that's what caught your eye there. But I say we're heading towards into the kind of the financial institutions as we work our way down towards the Thames, which is where we're going to end up. So if you're able to follow this, basically we're sort of going in roughly a kind of straight line. And eventually we're going to hang a right down by Monument and work our way down to the Thames and head down towards the Tower.
I think it's actually pronounced Thames.
Famous, really?
It's a famous river.
A famous river, yeah.
It was so beautiful the last 2 days because the weather's been gorgeous. And, you know, I walked through Green Park earlier. I actually had a group of Canadians on for a private tour.
Okay.
And I took them down to the Canadian Monument right by Buckingham Palace, which was to the contribution of Canadian soldiers in both wars. And all of the flowers were coming out. So I hope you're enjoying, anyone from Alberta, I hope you're enjoying the minus 15 at the moment. I did put my light jacket on now. But no, it's just gorgeous at the moment.
So you can see the light is starting to come down. We're into sort of dusk period now, so the light is kind of changing. Will give us a kind of slightly different perspective on these buildings. But as I say, it's kind of busy, so hopefully the signal's okay at the moment. So let's enjoy it. But that looks rather nice, doesn't it, at the end there, actually, where we're sort of seeing now the skyscrapers are starting to kind of work their way through. Yeah. So I mean, I don't know how people feel about kind of these modern... When I kind of say temples of glass, I'm not necessarily being critical, merely pointing out that they have the presence today that cathedrals had in their day. They're designed to be noticed, right?
Yes. I also think one thing we have to step back to. So it was interesting. Yesterday I did a talk about St. Patrick's Day, and I had meant to introduce the concept of the Malthusian principle.
Yeah.
And I didn't yesterday because I got off topic.
Go for it.
But Malthus, of course, was an Anglican minister who believed that population would naturally correct themselves, and that's why he felt that the Irish should all die in the famine because it was like rabbits controlling themselves. Well, we now live, about the time he published his thesis, he was exactly wrong, and the world's population boomed. We now live, this was the most important city on planet Earth for about 100 years. The world's population was under 1 billion. Now we're 8 billion. So we have a choice. We either go out or we go up. And this is our reality. And it's fascinating. I mean, John lives up, of course, in New York, which is a very lucky man to live up there. But we both live in quite small spaces. 50% of the world's population are now going to be living in these towers.
Derek, St. Patrick's Day is the patron saint of Ireland, and so on St. Patrick's Day, it's basically a global celebration of the Irish and the Irish diaspora that is spread around the world, principally driven because of A, the famine, and B, the lack of work opportunities for lots of
Totally.
of them.
The great hunger, we call it.
Just looking at this building in front of us here, and it's almost Parisian, isn't it? I mean, if you look at architectural style, that could be straight out of the 12th arrondissement in Paris, couldn't it?
It could at the roof, absolutely, the handset roof there, but the rest of it is so Victorian to me, but I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
It is interesting, James Joyce once said, he was famously not a person of few words,
No.
but James Joyce once said that a nation is a people with a collective identity who live together except when they don't.
Yeah.
And that's the diaspora, and that is that broad celebration that St. Patrick's Day. Jimmy Kimmel actually said, because I woke up very early because of jet lag, said he loves St. Patrick's Day because it's the only holiday of the year where you can drink anything you want and you don't have to buy anyone a present.
Yeah. Do you know, talking about sort of that kind of difference, do you know Disraeli said that the north and the south essentially of England were just two different countries that had almost no social intercourse, no relationship whatsoever. And that's actually created by the Romans. From its kind of outset, the Romans imposed a kind of two-state solution on England. Once they realised that they couldn't conquer northern Britain and Scotland, they gave up. Hadrian Wall becomes a frontier. And they create two states. One of them, Londinium, here.
Yes.
Okay, Old Bailey, should have mentioned that at the time. Bailey is from the castle wall. So the Roman fort wall, built around 200 AD, or completed around 200 AD, basically surrounded the Roman fort. The second state was York. So you guys have all been on, a lot of you guys have been on tours with me in York, and you know the kind of Roman architecture up there. So in effect there was two cities the Romans founded that mattered. York and London, or Iberacum and Londinium. And that's what we're still looking at, is, if you like, the after effects. So when we look at, in front of us now, the Mansion House, so the home of the Lord Mayor. York had the first purpose-built mansion house.
Did it?
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating.
And the reason why, I know they did it down here as well, is that they used to move around from private lodgings.
Right.
From year to year. But as a result, things went missing. Civic plate, you know? And people go, oh, yeah, I've lost that. I like that, yeah. So you can imagine, you know, they weren't always honest guys that became Lord Mayors. Hard to believe, right?
And they're always guys, by the way.
Yeah. Always guys.
Ladies,
Dick Whitton, of course, the most kind of famous.
Just coming back to York, though, so Emperor Constantine was crowned in York.
Yeah.
And then hence Constantinople.
Yes.
That's how significant York was to the empire at that point. There are several different sections in the city here of the old Roman brick.
Just trying to give everybody a kind of sense. This is almost a case, and this is why York is really easy to do, because you can get distance. In London, everything's so close up, it's actually hard to go back sufficiently far enough to get the vistas that you kind of want to create. But I think you'd agree, that kind of Palladian style, that the Georgian embracing of the Greek and Roman style is quite something, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, of course, it reeks of Renaissance, and a reaching back to a different time. So it could use a cleaning.
So this building is the Mansion House in London. Yeah. So the Mansion House, Ginny, is the place where each year the Chancellor comes and makes the financial statement, which in effect is like the State of the Union address that they have in the States. So basically it's setting out, you know, how well the economy is doing. And so all the big wigs from the city come and get dressed up in their kind of bib and tucker, and they have a lavish dinner, and then they sit down and they listen to the Chancellor of the Exchequer talking about basically the health of the British economy. So it's one of the key. To cross over and not going to run over here. In front of us, one of the great institutions of trade, the Royal Exchange, looking rather fetching, which means that we are now on one of the most famous streets in the world. Just if I can show you that. Can you see that? Threadneedle Street. So what are we in front of, guys? The old lady of Threadneedle Street. Monday, yeah, bank, yes. The Bank of England, thank you, Satyam. Let's just try and get across the road because I think we can get a nice postcard. So Royal Exchange in front of us.
A few of you joined to Mark and myself in Belgium when we showed really the world's oldest stock exchange. But this is the structure of central banking right here as we understand it today. And this is global. This is a total spin-off. This predates, of course, the central bank of the United States, which really is just a function of the Civil War. So it is incredibly important.
Another hero of yours, Arthur Wellesley, the Duke of Wellington.
And he was erect in 1844.
Yeah. Much loved in Ireland.
Oh, loved him, yeah.
So we'll just come around so we can get you a shot of the...
Remember what the Duke of Wellington said, everyone, for the Irish? They said, well, you're an Irishman, you're born in Dublin. He said, if I was born in a stable, I wouldn't be a horse.
Yeah. That's the disdain that he had. He was an absentee landlord, wasn't he, really?
That's right.
Cromwellian in everything he did. So, smiley face, yeah. So, again, Bank of England. So, again, those certainly, from this country, I'm sure globally, you'll have seen news reports in front of here every time there's a kind of financial report. If it's political, it's in front of the House of Parliament. If not, it's here at the Bank of England. So, as I say, we're right in the heart of the levers of power. And this is what kind of fascinates me, is this concentration of power, of privilege, of the elites. Pale, male and stale, white, public school educated.
It is by definition. By the way, if you just saw me sign on, everyone, it's because I can see the chat better than I'm on the phone. So I'm watching John real live. That's what you look like, my friend.
Yeah. And this is what I was talking about with
Hi,
you before.
everyone.
My technique is based on my bad eyes. This is how I can read the screen. So I do like the long arm technique
Is
with
that
my
right?
eyes. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Let's walk on because there's plenty more to say. Now, this guy, I don't mind having a statue because he was one of the principal engineers that worked out how to do the tunnelling of the tube. And anybody who's spent any time living in London will know that the tube really is...
Is this a government building for the Exchequer?
Yeah. The Royal Exchange buildings, yes. It's one of the great sort of trade centres. And all this, of course, when these buildings were done, everything was done on private stock. And a lot of that happened in Canada, right? Raising funds for investments in the New World.
Oh, totally. Totally. In fact, today when I was over by Trafalgar Square, I saw the Canadian National Railway building and the Grand Trunk Railway building. This is where that money was raised. And even if it was filtered through places like Boston before that was independent, or through Montreal, this was the story of the whole thing.
Derek, if you talk about the Royal Exchange is late George. Well, the London guys may jump in here and help me out. I believe it is a later Georgian. So I think it's around about 1800-ish.
Cynthia's just asking about the statue we just passed.
The statue we passed is an engineer. So this guy, I was just saying, this guy was one of the mining engineers that worked how basically to work the tunnels. And obviously some of the very original, some of the oldest undergrounds in London, tube lines were very, very deep.
Taking photos of
Metropolitan line, that kind of first line down Baker Street and so forth, near where I used to get trained to Lords, incredibly deep, and they had to deal with really, really tough geological conditions to dig these tunnels, right?
Do you know one of the lovely stories about the Hammersmith and City was the first line? Is that correct?
I think it's a Metropolitan.
Oh, was it Metropolitan?
Somebody Google it if you want, but I think it's Metropolitan.
Yeah. I just remember that it was 2p to ride it, but only 1p during work hours, because why should you pay more to go to work? Can you imagine now? And what a genuine principle. What a change. Yeah. The Met line.
Yeah, I think the Metropolitan. Yeah. I think it's that sort of straight line, is it, from sort of Baker Street and...
right, yeah.
I can't think of the other people. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Helen. It's the Metropolitan line. It's the purpley coloured one. And that was the first of the main lines that kind of run through. But again, I'm just going to put us up above, because so often it's well worth looking above. 1863, perfect. It's when you look above, you sort of see the grandeur of these kind of buildings. It's it really is quite something. You know, a lovely kind of spot, and a water fountain here, because obviously long before people had running water in their homes, of course they had to have access for water in the streets. So a lot of these old kind of water pumps.
Poppy's just said it was open the Metropolitan line, but the actual route of the first underground is served by Hammersmith and City. See, that's where I had that in the back of my mind somewhere.
So as we're kind of walking down now towards the kind of monument area, on our left-hand side is East London, you know, kind of Cheapside, old jewellery. I think Poultry is just behind us here. So we're sort of on the edge of East London, and not too far away from here is the famous church of St Mary's, the Bow. And we all know the story of that, right? To be a Cockney?
Oh, yeah. If you hear the bells, it's So oranges and lemons sing the.
Exactly. That's all about not far away from here at all. I mean, literally a few minutes walk. So that's what's interesting about the city of London, as this was kind of growing up to be this international centre full of kind of luxury buildings and great wealth and privilege. It was cheek by jowl with some of the poorest urban districts in London.
And horrendous conditions. Horrendous. Remember, life expectancy in the 1600s pre-Great Fire was about 31 years of age.
Yeah. Look at these lights here. They're pretty. Sometimes you just have to say, good job. So the Counting House, which again originally would have been obviously a financial institution, now is a bar, restaurant, but what a lovely job they've done there. Yeah, so we're not far from Spitalfields. Obviously London, Whitechapel, Natalie's Jack the Ripper tour, again not too far away from here. So it's this great...
Natalie's Jack the Ripper tour, everyone, if you haven't been on it yet, is just outstanding.
Awesome. It's awesome. Yeah, it should be award-winning, right?
Yeah.
It's a great tour. I'm sure many of you have done it. If you haven't, do check in the next time she does it. So you've got this real kind of contrast, and that's London all over, right? You've kind of got great riches next to extreme poverty.
Well, I mean, it's these great world capitals. So Rome at its height was about 1 million people. Right? It's interesting to play back. Mind you, Beijing would have had 1 million people too at those times. So these are always lost numbers. But this was such an incredible financial center, and it remains so. It is interesting, the transition, because something like 1/5 of all banking in the world passes one way or another through this area. I believe, and I know there's Londoners on board, I believe there's no more than about 5,500 permanent inhabitants within the 1 square mile of the City of London.
It's crazy, right?
Because people migrate out every day, and look how suddenly quiet it's getting. So they rush out from work, they go to the pub.
Let's cross over.
And then they go home.
So we're heading down towards now the monument, which is obviously the monument to the Great Fire of London. 1666, which did two things, which is just sort of over here, unless I've got my bearings.
I'm just looking up at the building of the walkie-talkie.
Yeah, the signal may drop for a second, guys, which is in a bit kind of covered over.
Thanks, Dan.
And the new city, if you like, grew from the old city. You know, a city that was much more akin to York. So those that have been on the York tours and have experienced the shambles and these kind of little what appears like rabbit warrens almost, kind of interweaving streets. Have we gone the right way? Should we have gone down this way?
We've got two ways we can go around.
Sorry guys, that busy chatting, I've lost the route. But I think that we just need to be just down here, don't we? Because there's the Shard there, it's just by the Shard, isn't it? Yeah,
exactly.
So sorry, we just need to cross over again.
It's because of the construction.
The construction just kind of threw me out there.
Down through here.
Plus being not entirely... Yeah, we lost our way slightly, but, who doesn't lose their way from time to time in central London? So let's just try and make good of that. So we're heading towards down the Shard, which again, of course, is one of the iconic modern buildings of London that sits alongside, these great historic, archways and terms. So we're coming to Leadenhall Market. We're in a market district behind us, the old Bishopsgate Market. We're not too far from Smithfield Market around here, so we're very much in the old market district, which work the way right up to Covent Garden, of course, with the fruit and veg markets. So everything.
Look at this gorgeous
is
archway.
Gorgeous. Yeah. I'm glad we lost our way, because now we can bring you really something. I'm not strangers to London, Joanne. Just in an area that I don't know so well, if I'm being brutally honest. But again, just look at this light. Ooh. Very, very attractive.
I think we might just have to end the tour and go in for a pint here.
We might just have to, yeah.
All right, see you later, everyone. But this is, oh wow, this is just gorgeous.
Isn't this lovely? Just look at this Victorian architecture. So I think if we go out this way, we should be.
Either or, yeah.
And this is what I like about the Victorians, Patrick, is when they had the chance to build, they said it can be beautiful and functional at the same time.
This is the market.
It's Leadenhall Market, yeah.
Yeah. There's the champagne shop. I really find the windows are sparkling.
Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it? Just the whole light.
Oh, and there's a vintage port shop.
It's just lovely. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Oyster bars with very, very traditional London.
I have never understood why someone opens an oyster bar.
Yeah.
They can't even sit on a stool.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, are you a Guinness and oyster guy? A traditional Irish tipple? And
I would be an oyster and white wine guy.
Oh yeah.
Although in Victoria, in Vancouver Island, you can get oysters for $1 a shuck, $1 a shuck at happy hour. And so then I don't tend to drink any booze. I just have so many oysters.
So which street are we on? Have we missed it? Anyway, we should be walking down towards the river, which is our kind of general destination. So if we've skipped past, and we've given you Leadenhall Market instead of Monument, then I can only say it's a fair exchange, no robbery. Patrick's just here.
I'm here. Sorry, I've moved over to the other side because I was looking around the market there and looking at the lovely shops.
There you go. You have some, Patrick.
Oh no, I'm just hanging out with my buddy John here. It's so much fun to catch up, and it really is fun to catch up. John and I connected quite early on, I think. And John has these very peculiar sleep habits where he makes my evening walks in Banff. And so we've started having some very meaningful conversations, and really good conversations. But where John is so fascinating to me is he's also quite into the technology. So his microphone setup here is very different from mine. These are kind of nerdy things. So we both finally caught up today for the first time at each other. And then we had to compare gimbals, which is an old male thing to do, I guess.
But they're both the good news. They're both the same size. Our gimbals.
They are. Yes.
There's no kind of competition on that.
No, John's actually attached the extender that I use today to try it out.
I was a bit worried about size, but it turns out we match up perfectly. So there's no issue there. Just want to put that one to bed right here, right now.
But in all seriousness, a lot of similar interests. And it's fun. I mean, I quite like doing tours in big cities. Of course, I do in Toronto and places like that as well. But London is just so full. Of course, it's seeping history out of the walls, and I think that's important. Today, I've been very spoiled to have a couple of days of perfect weather, and I'm sorry that we haven't. There's a guy dancing behind us. Yeah. This doesn't happen at home the same way. Yeah, but.
Well, the streets of London, it's going to happen. It's fine. People enjoying themselves.
But it's also
quite right too.
That right after work. I remember a friend of mine who works in the city here telling me this is one of the rare places where you're not allowed to wear a suit into a pub.
Yeah.
Because people go straight from the office into their pubs to work. Or to drink, after. And then they're kind of done by 8 o'clock at night or something. Totally different from other parts of the world where you go home, get changed, and go out, right? Just a whole different function. Anyway, you guys are staring at me too much. We got to stare out the front there and enjoy.
And that's the thing, is it around here, it'll be busy after work, but then you said 9, 10 o'clock, it starts getting very, very quiet. And so it's a kind of weird, kind of very straight after work kind of vibe. So let's just
did you, Helen?
Get our bearings. Because
Helen used to waitress. She used to serve right here in the city. That's quite fun.
All right, we've got an orientation board here. So here we are. We're back at Monument. So we've just taken a long way around to Monument. That's fine. So then if we can now show you Monument. So we just took the long way around. So Monument is come meet Hovey interview, and the Monument is quite literally the monument to the devastation wrought by the Great Fire of London in 1666. And it's got a double-edged sword. The fire. So on the one hand, obviously it destroyed London. But it also killed the plague.
Like Tudor London, yeah.
Yeah,
yep.
It killed the plague, right?
Yep.
So at that time, London was in the thrall of the Great Plague. And very difficult to shake off the bubonic plague.
Probably get our best view of the top of it right now, actually. There's there.
So it worked as like the ultimate kind of bacteria killer, right?
Do you know, given that we... Sorry, did you say that...
You can't wear suits in the pub.
No. There are pubs that have made those rules. because they want to be more of an evening experience rather than the after work.
Yeah, so if it comes just after work, then you become deserted later on. So it's really people trying to protect their businesses. So we'll go a bit closer up to the monument now and just give you a sense. So this monument, I believe, is about 200 feet, 220 feet. And what I read, I don't know if it's true, what I read was that it's precisely the distance between here and where the fight actually started.
If you lay it on its side. Yeah.
Yeah, is that true?
That's the thing that the local guides say. So our friends, as soon as we're done this, we're meeting a friend of mine who's a Blue Badge guide, so we can ask him. Just to come back to the plague for a minute, because all of us, and many of us have become connected on the back end of a global pandemic, and I think it's important and by the way, I took COVID very seriously, and I know many of you did as well. At the back end of this COVID experience, the death rate will have proven to be about 0.72, 0.73%. During the plague, several waves of the plague, the death rate was upwards of 50%. So you can draw a direct historic line between the Great Plague and the Industrial Revolution in Britain because of the massive inheritance that happened as people died en masse everywhere in every community, and they ate, drank, and were merry, for tomorrow you may die, is fundamental to the plague history. And the plague still exists, incidentally. It just doesn't kill us anymore because we can treat it with antibiotics. So there we go. Here's the monument.
A little bit of the inscription. I won't bother with the text all in Latin, but you can see it's like Nelson's column, basically in scope and size. But yeah, do you know what I find really fascinating about that?
Let's just get a postcard of the sign here.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Just while we're holding there, getting close. What fascinates me, Patrick, is not that 50% of the people died, which of course is appalling, but 50% lived. They were living in the same conditions, cheek by jowl. Oh. And it makes you wonder how it was that they actually were able to survive that.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of science on the fact that bubonic plague still exists is an incredibly moving reality. You know, we really have to talk, I guess, and we're having a light, friendly walk now, but talk about human history, that until antibiotics, until about 115 years ago, your likelihood of making it to 50 was pretty rare. Not if you were Inuit, or maybe if you're Aymara and up in the highlands of Bolivia, but if you were in Europe, you were making it to 35, 36. Like, those are your waning years. But this idea of what the world was like at that point, the utter tragedy, and of course they knew it was spreading between each other, but they didn't know how, of course. And so your family would get sick, and within 3 days would die, and then you couldn't decide if you would dispose of the body. Do you know, over by Scotland Yard, near Westminster, there's one little green patch that apparently is a plague graveyard, and to this day, no flowers grow there. Now, whether that's connected or not, who knows, right? But it is remarkable. But the city of London, pre-fire, pre-1666, apparently you could pretty much reach across. And you know that, like, my mum trained me when I walk down the street. You're probably the same with your mum, John.
Quickly.
I have to walk on the outside when I walk down the street with my mum, right? And that is from the days of the carriages going by, or people throwing their bedpans out the window. just
that still happens, you know that.
Oh my! Just imagine. And this is where places like Montreal have their incredible winter myth, because in such a cold, harsh place, it all froze up and the smells went away for 3 or 4 months every winter.
Yeah.
So winter was actually a lovely time. But to imagine, now these modern buildings around us here, this is all a function of World War II. This was all the carpet bombing and the horrendous destruction and the violence, which we are now, as a planet, just witnessing yet again.
So we've got London Bridge to our right. So again, is it an apocryphal story? You know, this idea that the guy in Nevada bought London Bridge by mistake.
I believe that it was an absolute mistake. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I honestly thought he was buying Tower Bridge.
Lake
Havasu.
Lake Havasu, right? Yep. In Nevada,
right? In
Arizona.
Arizona.
Yes.
Yeah,
Arizona.
Yeah.
So this is the famous London Bridge, and I know Charlie is taking you down here and giving you. So we're coming onto Embankment now. So we're walking sort of down the Thames.
Sally, you're saying it's not true? They did buy the bridge, though. Look at the Shard. Isn't that
Shard.
Great? We should go up there for a cocktail.
Seen it. Oh, Kathy from Surrey seen it. Surrey, I thought you meant Surrey, England, British Columbia. I'm guessing there, BC.
Yeah, Surrey. Yeah, I know Kathy. Kathy's in Vancouver. Montreal originally. Lovely human being.
Yeah, so just to clear that bit up, I've seen a couple of conversations about, so at London British Hospital, the bubonic plague is in English history, is described in two phases. One, of course, is the Black Death, which is principally between 1348 and 1350, although it comes back again in 1361, 1389, never really goes away. And then the Great Plague, which starts in 1664 and comes to its pinnacle in 1666, just prior to the fire of London. So when you talk about the Great Plague, generally speaking, we're talking about the 17th century, we're talking about the Black Death, predominantly talking about the 14th century. It's the same disease, we're just talking about huge explosions of infection.
Paula, we're not actually on the... are you on? You're not on the app, are you? No, we don't have the Zoom on.
No. So we'll walk towards it. We're just on time. So we've got 12 minutes left to get up to Tower Bridge, the Tower of London, getting some iconic shots. But in the meantime, of course, we'll just give you an appreciation of the river, because...
Heidi, it's really gotten darker, and of course, what John was hoping for is exactly this. Now the lights of the bridge have come out. But yeah, we're looking across towards Borough. Do you know, one of the times that I lived in London here, I actually lived over in Borough, and I had a great time. There's a lovely market there. It's a lot of fun, and we're not very far. We're not going to quite see. We're not very far from the Globe, of course. You know, Shakespeare's theatre. By the way, if you do get tickets for the Globe, remember you can be standing for 3 hours. So just keep that in mind. It's a forgotten thing. And traditionally, the actors were all male, so even the women. So
I'll just stop again for it. It is, Ginny, HMS Belfast, so a decommissioned Royal Navy ship that now works as a museum. And a training ship it was for a long time. I don't know if they still use it as a training ship. But we are absolutely coming up towards Tower Bridge. So if you've got to get to Tower Bridge and you turn left in there into the East End, Brick Lane, famous for its curries, is very near where we are. And of course, this is a lift bridge. And the reason it's a lift bridge was, of course, London was a port first and foremost. This is where its wealth came from. The Thames estuary up at Kent and Essex was basically the trading point where huge amounts of goods came into the British Isles. So, of course, because this was navigable, when Tower Bridge was built, it was built to lift, to allow the big masted boats to come right the way into the city. And so that much of East London, what's now Canary Wharf, and the East End Docklands, was just that, right?
Oh, it was Trueport, yeah. And it's tidal all the way up to Richmond. Now, of course, this actual island is not huge, but we're about, am I fair to say, John, about 25 miles from actually the Atlantic, or the English Channel? From
I
here?
would think so. Something of that order, maybe a little bit longer.
You get out
this,
to,
I believe, this is Customs House, or is it? No, it's the next one. I think it's Customs House.
Yeah, I think
it's a little bit dark, so I'll just keep us on the river. So Customs House, of course, is the place where taxes are paid, because obviously traders' opportunities to levy taxes, import duties. This is what drives the economy. This is what made the city so rich. The ability to tax goods coming in, going out, markets.
Wonder today, so much of our global economy is actually built around transportation. And this is why we have supply chain crises in the world right now. But really just put it in some perspective, right? If you take away your buses, your cars, your trains, your airplanes, your airports, you're knocking out about 25% of the global economy.
Yeah.
And so when you tax movement, you're actually taxing the human economy.
Yeah.
And when we all close down in a pandemic, it's amazing the effect that has on us.
And waking up from that has been a huge shock, hasn't it, to the system?
It's been a stunning shock. I kind of like the clean skies.
And you get a sense down here, really, of the tidal quality. I don't know how well we can see in the light. Probably just not enough, unfortunately, in this light. But you've got, in effect, like a tidal shore coming in here. You've got a mini beach set up. I'm not going to dwell on that because, obviously, you can't see. But oh, yeah.
For a postcard. Look at that fabulous new building. Isn't that gorgeous, everyone?
Yeah, I'm losing the gimbal slightly. But
Yeah, isn't that beautiful? Now, because I'm kind of a nerd and have my metal detector, I do watch YouTube videos of people who metal detect along here, and they even find Roman coins.
Wow.
That's, Roman coins aren't worth anything.
No.
The Romans printed so many coins.
Yeah. they were the first ones to devalue their own currency. Yeah, absolutely.
That's exactly a function, but it's still neat to find one.
So where we started off at the Old Bailey was, in effect, the Roman fort. That was the original castle of Londinium. That was the fort, the fortress, if you like, that controlled it. Surrounded by a moat, and of course the Bailey is the outer ring. So you have a central tower, central sort of fortress, basilica as they were called in Roman fortresses. But of course, it didn't last. The location wasn't as good as the location we're about to hit upon next, which is probably on the Big Ben and the bridge, one of the great sights of London.
The truly iconic images and the Tower of London. The best story, though, that again the local guides, my blue badge friends, say is they developed it so that the moat would flush itself out as the tide would come. However, they got it wrong at the beginning.
Okay.
And it was such a cesspool that if you fell in the water, it was worth your life.
I'm just going to give us another panning shot along just the side. Big as it. It is one of the great rivers of the world, isn't it?
It's so important. And again, the Great Central Canal that comes down the middle of the UK is actually the origin of the Industrial Revolution as we know it today. Quite a flat
That's going to be
island.
London Wednesday. So we get to see a lot of rivers on this. We some fantastic pictures of the River Liffey. I don't know if you saw that sunrise over the Liffey sunset. Yeah, in Dublin the other day. Each city's got its own kind of river, but this is sort of a river of the world because it was a focal point for both global trade, but also, the disembarkation point, if you like, for when Britain was the biggest global power, and we weren't necessarily a force for good, but nonetheless, for a relatively brief period, Britain was, the most powerful nation on the planet.
There's a reason why it's the most spoken second language in the world.
And these symbols that we're looking at, the financial centre, the Bank of England, the Mansion House, the religious centre with St Paul's, the judicial, we exported law codes all around the world. Most of the former parts of the British Empire are really beginning to now really unpick British law codes. For the most part, they were simply just exported wholesale, right?
Yeah. Wholesale. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and the French did it as well. The two countries really made this point of putting out these systems as they saw them. But it is interesting because basically our planet's separated into two legal systems, right? Common law or Code Civil.
Yep.
And that is fundamental to either British or Spanish, French.
So a bit dark here, guys. Just we could have come around this bit, coming up towards Tower Bridge and the tower. So I'll just try and get us through here. It's suddenly got so dark down here. Hi, Lynn. It's good of you to join. It's very late in the day. We're almost at our conclusion, but hopefully the site of Tower Bridge illuminated there. The gateway, of course, to the majestic River Thames it's not a bad place to start, is it? If you only get 5 minutes, Patrick.
Oh, it's gorgeous. Yeah.
And I'm here in London with the one and only Patrick Twomey, probably the biggest
North Side, Tanya. Yeah.
The biggest sort of most followed, I think, guide on the platform. So fantastic company in this great city.
We're all one big family.
And all enjoying one of the great iconic sites, I think, of the world. Is the Eiffel Tower, the Taj Mahal, Tower Bridge, they're all of a piece for me. They're just so distinct and interesting visually.
I think you forgot the Calgary Tower.
The Montreal Tower, there are there's some wonderful, some ancient, some modern. These guys that created this, to me, is just as valid.
Absolutely.
Okay? Yep. So they've created something of interest that is visually stimulating and interesting, and is worthy to form part of the London skyline, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
It's one of my bugbears in York, and people have heard me moan about this, is that you get a crisis of confidence of architects, that they don't do anything that's going to get in the way of the historic architecture, so they try and do something that's too bland.
Yes.
And I think that's a danger. I think we've got to say there's a real danger of saying everything that was good is in the past.
Oh, terrible. Yep.
And what message that sends to young people, to Finn's generation,
Absolutely, and I think it still brings us back to that earlier point that 120 years ago, when where we started the Old Bailey, 19 years ago, that was a huge edifice, but that was a world of fewer than 1 billion people. Now we're a world of 8 billion people, and we have to find some way to live together.
Yeah.
So that really matters. Yeah.
I think it absolutely does. And so somebody just mentioned Prince Charles and the carbuncle, which is a kind of appropriate comment to bring the royals into it, because, of course, the great origination of power was the royals, and we're about to just stumble upon now the greatest symbol, if you like, of the power of the sort of British royal family that possibly exists, the Tower of London. The thought being sent to the Tower, of course, striking fear into the barons that would, of course...
Totally agree, These are just gorgeous little bubble restaurants.
Aren't they lovely?
So it's the sort of thing that grew up because of obviously distancing, but I think have now just stayed in place, haven't they? You know, as part of our cityscapes. If we get down here, we should be able to get a good view of the tower, shouldn't we? From the pier.
Yeah, it's open.
Yeah. And just get a visual of the tower from here, and then we'll.
This is where you can actually take a boat right down the river. There's the tower.
So here we are, guys. I thought we'd just end up with a nice visual of the tower, and we can just have a walk around that. But Patrick is now all across the chat. So is there any questions or comments? Obviously, we've covered quite a lot of distance, which hopefully you've enjoyed.
Oh, Jenny's down in Eastbourne. That's lovely, Jenny. Hi there. Yeah, John, the boats are great fun. Yeah, are there any questions for us, anyone? John and I say we began connecting. It's probably 8 or 10 months ago, and we've had lots of interesting chats about history, and we've had some good debates tugh, which is part of the fun.
Let's just walk around and see the other side. You keep talking to the guys.
Pam and Ellie are in Arizona there, yeah. Oh, Paula, I hope you're feeling well, by the way. Paula's got the big COVID, so...
Red sauce or brown sauce? For me, brown sauce every day of the week. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm a complete spice head, and brown sauce is like a kind of entry-level drug. You know, it's the marijuana, you know, of spice sauces.
So
brown sauce.
It's my upper end. but I did go out and have rashers with brown sauce this morning on principle. They were vegan rashers.
Yeah.
They weren't.
Helen, I'm glad that you said that. It's the right answer. You know, is there certain questions that just divide us?
Well,
you know,
Carol Walker. So Carol Walker is in Calgary. Carol Walker is a brilliant human being and an academic.
Okay.
And has actually been on real life tour with me, and she's been over here many, many times, even with me, I think, Carol. So it's lovely to see you there.
So the famous White Tower hoving interview. Though we can't get obviously any closer. On this tour, and we're probably going to run into signals, and we're at our time. So, yeah, we're on the near the Tower of London. Absolutely.
On the west side.
On the west side of the tower. So Traitors Gate is down around the corner. Of course, the notorious site where the blocks of execution. And at first, of course, the Tower of London was a military garrison, was it not? But it became infamous, really, as a prison. But as a prison for a special kind of prisoner, the traitors. And of course, traitors are kind of different to you run-of-the-mill criminals. They've got power. They've got money.
Yep.
To be a traitor is to have the means to potentially undermine the system, right?
You'd have to matter.
Yeah. So these are the barons, the dukes, the earls. These are the people that are imprisoned.
This is why Putin's locking up a lot of his closer confidence right now. Same thing. They would be traitors. Yeah?
Completely a palace, yeah. So William the Conqueror first built it for himself as a palace, but of course incorporated within that, you know, a garrison, so able to protect and so forth, you know, and kind of mobilise. So it's gone through lots of iterations, but I think it's most famous, isn't it, you know, as a place of detention, a place of execution.
And by the way, for all you Canadians on board, the crown jewels are in here, but you may or may not know they spent the war in right by Dorchester Square in Montreal. And they were shipped over because that was Britain's ability to borrow money during the war.
The jewels, then?
The jewels.
Yeah.
They underpinned, of course, the Chancellery, which we talked about today. Then there is a cave dug in the side of Hart Mountain, just up the road from Canmore, Alberta. That's where they would have moved them had Montreal been attacked. And that's all from here, and that underpins going right back to the 12th century, 1066, so the 11th century. It underpins the whole story of what common law is today. So how's that, hey?
So there we go, guys. Let's just see if we can just get a bit of light on us just to say goodbye. Because it's been that's been nice, the backdrop, yeah? If you want to come in there, buddy, I think we can...
Tower of London.
You're just about going to make us out there.
He really looks tall, doesn't he?
So, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I know it was a bit loose-limbed at times. We got a little bit lost. But that's what happens when you go to a city it's not yours. But I think it's valid, you know, to come together and present this to you a bit different. Could be a long time till it happens again. So hopefully you can forgive our transgressions, the odd drop of signal, because when you've got company like Patrick Twomey, you can, I'm sure, forgive that. So thank you so much.
I think John has to come over and stay in Banff. I mean, we have the guest room, so the door's wide open.
It's not a no.
Yeah, come on over with the family. So, all right, everyone.
We're going to have a beer. Thank you so much, everybody. Great to see you. We'll see you again very, very soon. Bye-bye.